The hallway was dim, lit only by the faint glow of the porch light bleeding through the frosted glass panels near the front door. I stood frozen, barefoot on the cool hardwood floor, one hand still clutching the doorframe to our bedroom. He was just inches away, close enough that I could see the rise and fall of his chest, the way his jaw tensed like he was biting back something dangerous. We weren't touching. We hadn't said a word. But the pull between us was loud. Deafening. His eyes flickered from my lips to my eyes, then back again. I heard my own breath tremble, felt my pulse drumming in my ears. And just as he leaned in, the floorboard creaked behind us. I flinched. A door opened down the hall. And everything stopped. Everything. Before I begin the story and tell you how everything really happened, answer this question: would you be able to forgive a loved one's betrayal? Thanksgiving always came with chaos. The table was never quite big enough. Someone always forgot to bring pie. The kitchen smoked, the turkey dried out, and someone inevitably dropped a plate. But this year, chaos came with an extra suitcase. He arrived just after noon, duffel bag slung over one shoulder, keys jingling, smile wide and unapologetically confident. My husband greeted him like a long-lost brother. "You remember my nephew," he beamed, patting the young man's back. I nodded, pretending not to flinch at how different he looked now. The last time I saw him, he was a lanky teenager in basketball shorts. Now, he was taller. Broader. His voice had dropped, and the way he looked at me was no longer boyish. It was something else. We set another place at the table, dragged an extra chair in from the garage. Football played on mute while dinner was served. Conversation flowed over mashed potatoes and cranberry sauce, but I barely heard any of it. That evening, I stepped out to the porch to cool off. Too many bodies in the house. Too much heat from the oven, from the noise. I didn't expect him to follow me. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. I shrugged. "It's your house now too." We stood in silence for a minute, just watching the wind sway the last of the brown leaves clinging to the trees. He finally spoke. "Not gonna lie. I didn't think I'd end up here this year." "Neither did I said without thinking." He looked over at me, and something unspoken passed in the space between us. That night, I couldn't sleep. The guest room was down the hall, but every creak of the floorboards had me holding my breath. Around 2 a.m., I sat up in bed, unsure why I'd woken. Then I saw the shadow at the door. He stood there, quietly, just watching. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. After a long second, he turned and walked away. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I tried to shake it off. I made coffee, burned the toast, and told myself it was all just nerves. Holiday stress. But when he walked into the kitchen, shirt clinging to him from a jog, hair damp, eyes clear, my stomach turned, and not in the way I was used to. Later that afternoon, my husband asked me to take his nephew to Lowe's to grab a new light bulb for the garage motion sensor. "It's acting up again," he said. "You know how to deal with that stuff better than me." So we went. The drive was silent until I missed the turn. "You passed it," he said with a small laugh. "I know," I said, turning sharply into the next driveway. "GPS much?" "I don't like machines telling me what to do." He chuckled. "Noted." At the store, we barely spoke. But when he reached above me to grab the last box on the top shelf, I didn't move. Neither did he. Back home, I went straight to the laundry room. Anything to get away from the rising pressure. But fate had other plans. He was already in there, loading his clothes. Shirtless. "I spilled barbecue sauce," he explained. I nodded and turned to leave. That night, he knocked on the bedroom door. Just once. A soft, single tap. I opened it, heart pounding. He looked at me with calm certainty. "You're beautiful," he said. Just that. And then he walked away again. The next morning, I found him sitting on the porch steps with a cup of coffee in hand. I joined him. No words. Just silence. Until he turned his head toward me. And we kissed. Later that evening, we were packing to visit my in-laws 2 towns over. My husband had left his GoPro behind, the one he used every year to film the Thanksgiving get-together. He cursed when he realized it. "You two go ahead," he said, tossing the keys. "I'll catch up after I grab the camera. Won't take more than 20 minutes. I froze. Because we weren't supposed to stay behind. But we did. Just the 2 of us. In the house. Together. And as the car pulled away and disappeared down the street, I realized something. This wasn't an accident. This was a setup. His GoPro was in the glove compartment the whole time. The engine had barely faded in the distance when I turned away from the window. The house felt immediately different, as if something had been released into the air. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was watchful. The kind that wraps around your throat without touching it. I didn't move at first. Neither did he. We just stood in opposite corners of the room, pretending to look busy. He adjusted the cuff of his sleeve, eyes down. I picked up a coffee mug I didn't want and filled it just to hear something familiar. The click of the Keurig. The whir. The drip. He reached for the sugar at the same moment I did. Our hands brushed. Only briefly. But I set the cup down immediately and walked away. I didn't even add cream. Outside, the trees barely moved. No wind. No birds. The neighborhood was still recovering from the leftovers of Thanksgiving. The world felt slower, quieter, like it had paused to give us space, and that was the problem. He stayed in the living room, scrolling aimlessly through his phone. I wiped down a countertop that didn't need wiping. Every moment stretched a second too long. By noon, we needed a reason to get out. Something to fill the hours. I said the motion light in the backyard still wasn't working right. He offered to drive to Lowe's. The ride there was shorter than I remembered. No radio. No small talk. At a red light, I noticed him glance at me. Not long. Not intensely. Just enough to confirm I wasn't imagining it. I kept my gaze locked on the stoplight like it held answers. Inside the store, we split up. I went to look at plants I didn't need while he found the bulbs. When I rounded the corner, he was reaching up, one arm stretched, his back slightly turned. The last box of motion sensors teetered near the edge of the top shelf. Without thinking, I reached out to steady the rack. At the same time, he grabbed the box. He didn't move. Neither did I. Then he took a step back, handed me the box, and walked ahead toward the checkout. No words. Back at the house, I escaped to the laundry room. It had become my sanctuary lately. Warm. Tiled. Away. I didn't expect him to already be there, shirt slung over the washing machine, detergent cap in his hand. "I spilled barbecue," he said. "Nothing else." I nodded once and turned. But before I left, I saw it. The way he watched me, not like someone apologizing. Not like someone embarrassed. Like someone waiting. Upstairs, I tried to read. Then I tried folding towels. Then I just sat on the edge of the bed until it was dark. I didn't know what I was waiting for until I heard it. A single knock. Quiet. Hesitant. When I opened the door, he didn't step inside. He just stood there, gaze steady. His voice low. "You're beautiful." And then he left. I didn't sleep again that night. The morning felt broken. We moved like ghosts through the kitchen. I poured cereal, but didn't eat. He sat by the window and stared at nothing in particular. After a long while, he stood up and went to the porch. I followed a few minutes later. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed air. The house had become too loud in its quiet. I sat beside him. The sunlight filtered through the bare branches, casting soft patterns on the porch railing. He didn't look at me. I didn't speak. A dog barked somewhere down the block. Then he turned. And we kissed. It didn't last long. We didn't speak afterward. We just sat there, the tension too thick to name. And that's when I saw the neighbor across the street, raking leaves, glance toward us and quickly look away. I stood and went inside. Later that evening, the front door opened. My husband walked in, GoPro in hand. "Guess where I found it," he said, laughing. "Glove compartment. I'm losing it." I tried to smile. He set the camera on the counter and opened the fridge. "You two didn't burn the place down, I see." "Nope," I said, barely above a whisper. He didn't notice the way I didn't meet his eyes. Didn't notice the way the nephew stepped into the hallway from the laundry room, holding an empty glass and looking completely still. But I noticed something. The GoPro wasn't dusty. It had been opened recently. And it had one red blinking light. Just one. Not flashing anymore. It had been on. The blinking light was gone. The camera sat quiet on the counter, lid closed, lens pointed toward the corner of the backsplash, like it had never been touched. My husband, distracted by something in the fridge, didn't see my face. Didn't notice the cold rush that spread through me as I stared at the device. He pulled out a bottle of orange juice, closed the door with his foot, and began telling some story about traffic. I wasn't listening. I was trying to remember exactly where the GoPro had been that morning. I had unpacked groceries on that very counter. I would have noticed it. Wouldn't I? "Glad I found it," he said cheerfully, twisting the cap off. "You know how my brother gets if I don't show up with footage." I nodded slowly. He poured a glass, took a sip, walked into the living room, and turned on the game. As if nothing had happened. As if nothing was wrong. The nephew walked past me in the hallway, eyes on the floor, glass still empty. He didn't stop. Didn't look at me. His footsteps faded up the stairs, leaving only the hum of the fridge and the distant sound of sports commentators. The rest of the evening unfolded with forced normalcy. I made dinner. No one really ate. The house was too quiet for a day that was supposed to be about family. The tension didn't explode, it thickened. The next morning, I woke early. Restless. There was a note on the table. My husband had gone to pick up something from Home Depot. Said he'd be back by lunch. I stood at the sink and watched the frost melt from the backyard fence. Then I felt him behind me. I didn't turn. He didn't speak. We just stood there, both of us knowing we had crossed a line and didn't know how to uncross it. We didn't go back upstairs. We didn't make excuses. We kissed. It happened like breathing, automatic and irreversible. The weight of all the unsaid things between us collapsed in one motion. And then, just as suddenly, we separated. No words. Just silence. He stepped back, jaw clenched, eyes full of panic or regret, I couldn't tell which. He left the kitchen, and I stood frozen by the sink, fingers trembling against the cool ceramic. The day dragged forward like an overloaded cart on broken wheels. I tried to clean, but every room reminded me of something. Every creak, every corner. I found myself folding the same dish towel 3 times, forgetting where I'd left the broom, standing in the pantry without remembering why I'd walked in. When my husband returned, he brought more than just the new power drill. He brought energy. Movement. He wanted to rearrange the garage shelves. He was in a good mood, energized by the project. I couldn't keep up. I offered to go get lunch. Take a break, I said, forcing a smile. I'll grab burgers from the diner. He agreed. The nephew was in the den, sketching something on a legal pad. I paused by the door. I'm getting food. You want something? He didn't look up. Whatever's fine. At the diner, the woman behind the counter greeted me by name. I ordered 3 burgers and iced teas. As I waited, I glanced out the window and saw an elderly couple walk by, hand in hand, bundled up in matching scarves. They looked simple. Untouched by chaos. It made my chest ache. Back home, lunch was quiet. No one said much. My husband talked about holiday lights. The nephew nodded at all the right times. I pretended to listen. That evening, we decorated the house. Strings of lights went around the porch railing, cheap garland over the fireplace, a new wreath for the front door. My husband asked his nephew to help with the ladder. I watched from the window, lights blinking in rhythm with my thoughts. They laughed about something. The tension thinned, but it didn't break. Later, we gathered boxes from the attic, ornaments, old nutcrackers, a paper star that hadn't lit up since 2012. I opened a bin and found a small ceramic angel I'd forgotten existed. It had belonged to my mother. I set it on the mantel without a word. My husband yawned, said he was heading to bed early. Don't stay up too late, he added over his shoulder. We've got to finish the backyard tomorrow. I stayed downstairs. I needed air, or space, or anything but the 4 walls around me. The lights twinkled through the window, casting shadows that danced across the hardwood floor. I stepped outside onto the porch, arms crossed against the chill. I heard the door creak open behind me. He didn't say anything. Just stood there. Watching. We can't do this, I whispered. I didn't turn to see his face. It'll ruin everything. Silence. I closed my eyes. My breath curled in the cold air. Then he said, "It's already ruined, isn't it?" I turned. His voice was calm, but empty. And before I could respond, headlights appeared at the end of the street. A slow-moving car pulled into our driveway. It wasn't familiar. We both watched as the door opened and a tall man stepped out, adjusting his jacket. My husband. He wasn't supposed to be out. He wasn't supposed to be anywhere but upstairs, asleep. I looked at the porch light, then back at the driveway. My husband stood beside the car, face expressionless. Then he lifted a small black item in his hand. The GoPro. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me. And then, slowly, he walked back to the car, got in, and drove off. The tail lights disappeared beyond the bend, swallowed by the fog rolling in from the far end of the street. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My hands gripped the porch railing, knuckles white against the chipped wood. Behind me, the door remained ajar, the nephew's presence lingering like static in the air. We stood in different silences, not speaking, not touching, yet tangled in a storm of implication. Inside, the house felt colder than it should have. The thermostat still blinked at 71. The floor creaked beneath our steps as we re-entered. I closed the doors slowly, carefully, as though anything louder than a whisper would snap the house in two. I paced the living room, then the kitchen, then back again. He sat on the bottom stair, elbows on knees, head tilted down. Not watching. Not thinking. Just existing in the middle of the rupture. What do we do now? I asked, barely above a murmur. He didn't answer. There was nothing to do. Nothing to explain. Nothing we could rewind. That night, the house remained in shadow. I didn't call. Neither did he. We moved as if under orders not to disturb the air. When the clock struck 9, I stood in the doorway of the guest room. He was there, standing by the window, arms crossed, looking out into nothing. He turned toward me slowly, as if he already knew. We spent night together. No words were needed. No promises made. The silence said everything louder than we ever could. Morning came like punishment. Pale light. Stiff sheets. The world returned with too much clarity. I left the room first. My footsteps felt too heavy, my reflection in the hallway mirror too sharp. I poured coffee I didn't drink. The kitchen clock ticked too loud. He eventually came down, his expression neutral but pale. We avoided looking at each other for too long. Breakfast didn't happen. Hunger didn't register. By mid-morning, the front door opened. My husband walked in. I froze. He wasn't carrying anything. No groceries. No tools. Just his coat, zipped to the neck, eyes tired but focused. "Hey," he said, like it was a regular Sunday. I nodded. He walked straight past us, straight to the bedroom, then back out again. Said he needed to stop by his brother's place again. Said it quickly. Said it while not looking at me. Within 10 minutes, he was gone. Again. We didn't speak until afternoon. I sat outside on the back steps, knees tucked up under my sweatshirt. Leaves crunched in the wind. He stood behind me, leaning against the doorframe. "I should go," he said. I didn't answer. I shouldn't be here. Still nothing from me. Finally, I said, "Then don't be." He disappeared for hours. I assumed he left. It was easier than thinking otherwise. I tried to clean. Couldn't. Tried to eat. Couldn't. I sat at the kitchen table and watched the sky change colors. Twilight settled in like fog. Then he came back. 2 plastic grocery bags in hand. Milk. Bread. Pasta. As if by doing something normal, it would make everything else untrue. We made dinner. Quietly. Efficiently. Almost like a team. Like we hadn't destroyed something just hours earlier. The moment shattered during cleanup. He looked at me, finally, really looked, and said, "Do you regret it?" I stared back. "I don't know what I feel anymore." He nodded, slowly, then turned and left the room. At midnight, I found him on the back porch again. Blanket over his shoulders. Looking up at the stars. "I used to think you were untouchable," he said, still facing the sky. Perfect. Married. Out of reach. My chest ached. Not from guilt. From the truth. "I'm not," I whispered. He looked at me. "Yeah. I know that now. I should have said something else. But I didn't." I just walked back inside and closed the door behind me. The next day, it snowed. Not much, but enough to cover the yard in a thin, quiet white. I watched it from the living room window while he shoveled the front path. My husband didn't return. Not that day. Around noon, the nephew stepped inside, took off his jacket, and disappeared upstairs. I heard drawers open. A suitcase zip. He came down 20 minutes later with his bag slung over his shoulder. I'm heading out, he said without looking at me. I didn't stop him. I just watched as he walked out the door. Watched the snow crunch beneath his boots. Watched until he turned the corner and disappeared. And then I realized. He didn't take his wallet. Didn't grab the charger on the kitchen counter. Left his sneakers by the stairs. This wasn't goodbye. This was a pause. One that hurt more than an ending. But that wasn't the twist. That came when I opened the fridge and saw 3 boxes of leftover Thanksgiving turkey stacked neatly on the top shelf. Next to them, taped to a bottle of cranberry juice, was a sticky note in my husband's handwriting. Don't forget to toss this before Monday. It'll start to smell. Meaning he never left for his brothers. Meaning he was still here. I stood there in front of the open fridge, holding the sticky note like it was a piece of evidence. The words weren't dramatic. They weren't angry. They were casual, almost boring. But that's what made them terrifying. It meant he never left. Not fully. Not completely. He'd been nearby. Watching. Waiting. Maybe listening. I closed the fridge slowly, each second feeling heavier than the last. The silence in the house was deafening, but not the comforting kind. It had teeth now. It pressed against my skin. It watched me when I moved. I walked through the rooms cautiously, as if the floorboards might tell him where I stepped. The guest room was empty. His shoes were still by the stairs. The nephew was still gone. But now I wasn't sure who had actually left anything behind. Upstairs, the master bedroom door was half shut. I pushed it gently, expecting nothing. Expecting maybe a forgotten jacket or an unmade bed. Instead, I found him. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, hands clasped, elbows resting on his knees. Not surprised to see me. Not startled. Just waiting. Neither of us said anything. I stayed in the doorway, trying to remember how to breathe. He stood up slowly, walked past me, and left the room. No eye contact. No sound. Just left. I followed. Downstairs, he went into the garage and began rummaging through the old bins we never opened. I hovered near the door but didn't step in. He pulled out a box labeled Christmas. It wasn't even December yet. He brought it into the living room and started unpacking. One by one, ornaments surfaced. Dusty plastic candy canes. A cracked snowman figurine. The ceramic angel I thought I'd lost years ago. I joined him without speaking. My hands moved through the tinsel and broken lights like they had purpose. My thoughts were somewhere else entirely. He didn't ask where the nephew had gone. He didn't ask what had happened while he was gone. He just moved like a man who'd decided the conversation had already happened. At dinner, we sat in silence. He chewed slowly, methodically. I barely touched my plate. The TV buzzed in the background, a game show rerun no one watched. Then he broke the quiet. You've been distant lately. I said nothing. He continued. And I've been absent. That's on me. Still, I didn't speak. I want to change that, he said. I want us to take a trip. Just the two of us. My fork slipped from my hand and clattered against the plate. I booked us a cabin. Wyoming. 2 weeks. He slid a printed confirmation across the table. I stared at it like it was written in another language. I think we need this, he added. There was no anger in his voice. No sarcasm. Just calm determination. He stood up and carried his plate to the sink. Turned on the water. Rinsed it clean. Then he left the kitchen. I stayed frozen. The idea of isolation, of being alone with him in some far-off cabin, made my chest tighten. I wasn't afraid of him. I was afraid of the silence. Afraid of what might surface in all that distance from everything. The next morning, I started packing. Mechanically. Sweaters. Socks. Toothpaste. I placed items in the suitcase without knowing what I was doing. Just motion. Just movement. He passed by the door a few times, offering soft smiles. I returned none of them. By noon, we were on the road. He drove. I watched the scenery blur into long stretches of white fences and bare trees. The kind of landscape that offers no distraction. Only stillness. We stopped for gas near the state line. I went inside the station to grab snacks and water. When I came back out, he was checking the back tires. "Pressure looks low," he said without looking up. I got in the car. We didn't speak for another hour. Eventually, the roads narrowed. Trees thickened. The sky dropped lower. The cabin was tucked deep into a stretch of forest, surrounded by thin snowbanks and silence. It was beautiful. Quiet. Remote. Exactly the kind of place where things either healed or fell apart completely. Inside, the heat was already on. Someone had prepared it. The fridge was stocked. The firewood was stacked neatly beside the hearth. We unpacked in silence. That night, we sat in front of the fire. He poured 2 glasses of wine. I held mine but didn't drink it. He turned toward me and said, "I know you think I didn't notice. But I did." My breath caught. "I noticed how quiet you became. How often you disappeared into other rooms. How he started taking walks at the same time you did." I stared at the fire. The crackling filled the space between us. I didn't say anything because I wasn't sure what I'd do if I was right. I looked at him. He looked tired. Not angry. Not betrayed. Just tired. He took a sip of wine. "I think it's my fault." "Partly. I stopped looking at you like I used to. Like you were still someone who could change the room just by walking into it." I said nothing. He stood, stretched, and said, "Let's not talk about this anymore tonight." He went upstairs. I stayed by the fire for hours. The next morning, I woke early. Stepped outside. The air was sharp, fresh. My breath left clouds in front of me. I walked down the small path behind the cabin and followed it until the trees swallowed the sky. I stayed there longer than I meant to. When I returned, the cabin was still. Too still. I opened the front door, set my gloves on the counter, and called out. No answer. I checked the bedroom. Empty. Kitchen. Empty. Then I noticed something. His suitcase was still there. His coat was not. On the table was a note. Folded. Blank on the outside. Inside, only one sentence. He knows everything. But the handwriting wasn't his. It was the nephew's. I held the note in my hand long after my fingers had gone numb. The writing was unmistakably his. Slanted, narrow, rushed like always. But he wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't supposed to know where we were. I looked around the cabin, suddenly hyper-aware of every window, every unlocked door. The stillness felt sinister now. I checked the porch, empty. The driveway, no car. The path behind the trees, untouched. The coat hooks were still full. My husband's jacket had been gone before. Now it was back. Damp at the sleeves. I opened the front door and stepped outside. The snow had thickened during the night, crunching beneath my boots as I stepped off the porch. I turned around, half expecting someone to be watching from the window. No one. Back inside, I folded the note and tucked it under a placemat. It felt dangerous to leave it in plain sight. I wasn't sure from whom I was hiding it anymore. By noon, the air inside had shifted again. My husband returned from wherever he had gone, casually brushing snow from his shoulders. He walked to the kitchen like everything was as it should be. "You disappeared," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Needed air," he replied. "There's a trail up by the ridge. Didn't want to wake you." His tone was even. Natural. But his eyes kept flicking toward the table. He noticed the placemat had moved. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded once. That night, we played the part. Made chili. Opened a bottle of wine neither of us liked. Sat by the fire. A movie played in the background, though neither of us watched it. He rubbed his eyes halfway through and muttered something about turning in early. I waited until I heard the creak of the stairs, the quiet click of the bedroom door. I went outside. The cold hit like a wall. I wrapped my coat tighter and followed the same path I'd taken earlier, one step after another, deep into the woods behind the cabin. The trees swallowed all sound. Just crunch, breath, heartbeat. A figure was already there, standing near the edge of the tree line. His back to me. He turned when I reached him. No smile. No apology. Just presence. "I thought you left," I said. I tried. We stood there for a while, breathing out clouds. "Why are you here?" He looked past me. "Because you are." I didn't ask how he found us. I didn't want to know. We didn't stay long. Too risky. Too exposed. When we walked back toward the cabin, we didn't speak. Just kept pace with each other until the structure came into view. The porch lights were on. Only one shadow moved inside. My husband was asleep on the couch, TV humming in the dark. A blanket draped over him. One arm hanging off the side. We froze just outside the glass. He didn't wake. The nephew slipped back into the trees. I watched him go until his silhouette dissolved into the dark. Inside, I moved quietly. I covered my husband's hand with the blanket and turned off the TV. The fire was down to embers. I sat there in silence, trying to make sense of what I had just done, of what I hadn't stopped. Morning came with thick fog. The lake behind the cabin was a sheet of glass. I stared at it while brushing my teeth, suddenly aware of the ache behind my eyes. He joined me at the breakfast table. No mention of last night. No questions. "We should go fishing," he said. "Like we used to." I nodded. We spent the day on the edge of the water, lines out, silence stretching thin between us. He talked about old memories, trips, birthdays, things we hadn't brought up in years. I responded with smiles I didn't feel. Later, he cooked dinner while I sat on the porch steps, watching the sky darken. He was trying. And somehow that made it worse. That night, I packed a small bag. I told him I was taking a walk. I didn't say I was going into town. I didn't say I needed space. I just left. Called a taxi from the gas station at the bottom of the hill and waited in the bathroom until it arrived. The driver didn't ask questions. I didn't say where I was going. Just told him to drive. When I finally spoke, I gave him the address of a motel 2 towns away. I sat on the edge of the bed for hours, staring at nothing, rehearsing the things I could say if either of them called. But no calls came. No texts. No knocks. Around midnight, I grabbed a soda from the vending machine and walked back across the parking lot. I reached the room, slid the key in, and froze. The door wasn't locked. I pushed it open slowly. Inside, the room was dark, but not empty. On the table, next to the bed, was a takeout bag from the diner near our house. And beside it, his wallet. The nephew's. He had been there. But he wasn't now. The room was still. The kind of still that makes your ears ring. I closed the door quietly behind me and stared at the bag on the table. The smell of fries and grilled onions lingered in the air. The receipt was still stapled to the paper sack. No name. No message. No sign of how long ago he'd been there. His wallet sat next to it, folded and worn, like he always carried it in his back pocket. It looked familiar. Too familiar. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside, nothing strange. Just his ID, a few bills, and a photo of his mom, folded in half from years of staying tucked behind a grocery store rewards card. I placed it back down, stepped into the bathroom, and splashed cold water on my face. My reflection looked worse under the harsh lights. Older. Tired. Like someone I used to recognize. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I kept the lights off and sat by the window, watching the parking lot. Every time a car pulled in, my breath caught. But it was never him. By morning, I had made a decision. I packed my things. Left the key on the desk. I walked to the diner next door and sat in the farthest booth. Ordered black coffee and oatmeal I didn't touch. I watched the door the whole time, half expecting him to walk through it, casually, like this was still a game of showing up and disappearing. He never came. Eventually, I called a cab. The same driver who brought me the night before answered. Said he'd be there in 15. I waited outside. The air was warmer now, the snow starting to melt in soft drips from the motel's gutter. When I got back to the cabin, it was just afternoon. My husband's car was parked exactly where I'd left it. The driveway had fresh tire tracks, his, presumably. The front door was unlocked. I stepped inside slowly, bracing myself. He was in the kitchen, standing at the stove, stirring something in a pan. He didn't look surprised to see me. I made breakfast, he said without turning. Late, but still breakfast. I set my bag down near the door. My legs felt heavy. I didn't know where you were, he added, sliding scrambled eggs onto a plate. Didn't want to call. Figured if you needed space, you'd take it. I sat at the table without a word. The plate landed in front of me. I thought I'd wake up and find a note, he said. Or your keys left behind. But instead, I found your toothbrush still in the holder. The room felt too small for all the things we weren't saying. He poured 2 glasses of juice. Sat across from me. Pushed the second glass toward my side of the table. You look like you didn't sleep. I didn't. He nodded, like he already knew. We ate in silence. The eggs were overcooked. The toast was cold. The moment felt like a performance we were both trying to finish before curtain call. After the plates were cleared, I walked outside. Snow was nearly gone now. Brown patches of grass peeked through. I sat on the porch steps and tried to catch my breath. The sound of footsteps startled me. He was behind me, not my husband. The nephew. Just standing there, near the edge of the woods. Not hiding. Not speaking. Just waiting. I stood, heart racing, but didn't walk toward him. I didn't know what I would say. He took a slow step forward, then another. Close enough now that I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. I came back to get my wallet, he said. I nodded. I didn't know you were still here, I answered. He looked down at the porch, then back at me. I was going to leave again, he said. But I couldn't. Then the front door opened. My husband stood there. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just stood in the doorway, eyes shifting between us. I didn't know what to do. The nephew stepped back. My husband looked at him. Then at me. Can someone tell me what the hell is going on? His voice wasn't angry. Just confused. Tired. Cracked around the edges. No one answered. No one could. The nephew looked at me once more, then turned and walked toward the trees. My husband stayed in the doorway. I stayed on the steps. The silence felt louder than anything I'd ever heard. By dusk, no one had spoken again. We made it through dinner with fork clinks and half-finished sentences. He cleaned the kitchen while I stared out the back window. When I went upstairs later, the hallway light was off. The door to the guest room was open. The bed was made. Too neatly. On my nightstand, I found something I hadn't seen in years. A photograph. The three of us. Taken at a family reunion. I was in the middle, between them. My husband on one side. The nephew on the other. It looked ordinary. Like a memory someone could trust. I turned it over. On the back, in faded ink, were 5 words. I see more than you think. I looked up and realized I wasn't alone in the room. My husband was standing behind me. I didn't put that there, he said. And then the hallway light flickered off. The hallway light flickered once, then went completely dark. I didn't move. My breath caught somewhere between my chest and my throat. My husband stood behind me, arms still, but the weight of his presence pressed against the back of my neck like gravity had changed its rules. I didn't put that there, he said again, quieter this time. The photograph in my hand felt colder than it should have. I turned it face down and placed it back on the nightstand, slow and deliberate. Neither of us moved for several seconds. Then I exhaled. He stepped past me, picked up the picture, and looked at the writing again. I watched his eyes track the words as if they'd shift under his gaze. I don't understand, he said, almost to himself. I opened my mouth to speak, but there was nothing to offer. Nothing would explain this without unraveling every thread we'd spent years pretending was still whole. I'm going to make tea, I said. He didn't respond. I left the room, descended the stairs quietly, and moved through the kitchen on autopilot, kettle, mugs, tea bags, honey. The warmth from the stove barely touched me. I set his cup on the table. Took mine to the living room and curled up in the corner of the couch. From where I sat, I could see the reflection of the hallway mirror. It was tilted slightly now. I didn't remember it leaning before. The air shifted. A soft knock at the door made my heart stop. Just 2 short taps. I placed my cup down and crossed the room, hand resting on the doorknob. Through the peephole, nothing. Just trees. Snow. Stillness. I opened it slowly. He was standing there. The nephew. Same coat. Same quiet eyes. Same stillness that always made the air feel too tight. Before I could speak, he stepped inside. My husband's voice rang from upstairs. Who is it? I looked back toward the stairs. Just someone returning something, I answered, too fast. The nephew remained silent. He walked past me, placed something on the entryway table, then turned to me. It was his phone charger. The one he'd left weeks ago. He didn't look toward the stairs. Didn't ask permission. Didn't explain. Then he leaned closer, just enough for me to hear. "He's not asleep," he whispered. "He's listening." He didn't wait for a reaction. Just opened the door again and slipped out into the cold, like he'd never been there at all. I shut the door and leaned against it, heart thudding so loudly I could feel it in my fingertips. From the top of the stairs came slow, even steps. He was coming down now. I moved to the kitchen, took my cup, tried to sip like nothing was off. He entered the room. Sat down. Stared at his own untouched mug. "I heard his voice," he said. I didn't answer. "He's not just a guest, is he?" I stayed still. His eyes met mine for the first time that night. "I've been trying to pretend," he continued. "But I'm done pretending." Silence thickened around us. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded slip of paper. Placed it on the table between us. It was the rental agreement for the cabin. I glanced down. There were 2 names printed on it. Only one was mine. "I knew the moment we got here," he said. My hands curled under the table. "Then why bring me?" He shrugged, slowly. "Because I thought maybe you'd confess. Maybe there was still something left." His voice broke on the word left. I didn't look up. Then he said, "He wasn't supposed to come here." "He didn't," I replied too quickly. He leaned back. "I followed him here," he said. "Last week. When you left for the motel." My body went still. He stood up, walked to the counter, picked up the ceramic angel from the mantel. The one I'd placed there weeks earlier. He turned it in his hand. "He stayed in that room," he said, nodding toward the guest room. "For 2 nights. My voice barely came out. "What are you talking about?" "He never left." "You thought he did." "But he didn't." The room shrank around me. He placed the angel down gently. Too gently. Then, without looking at me, he spoke again. "I left this morning. I went to the diner." I said nothing. "They know him there," he continued. "Said he comes in alone. Same time every week. Sits in the back. And last time, he brought someone." I didn't respond. He turned toward me. "They said she looked a lot like you." I felt my face drain of color. "I thought if I said it out loud, it would break whatever this is," he said. But it didn't. He walked toward the hallway. "I'm going back upstairs," he said. "If you want to follow me, follow me. If not, don't." His steps faded up the stairs. I remained at the table, the slip of paper still between my hands, heart beating out of rhythm. A few minutes passed. Then something strange happened. The lights in the kitchen dimmed. Not flickered. Dimmed. As if the house itself was holding its breath. I looked toward the front door. And there, sitting silently on the entryway table, was something I hadn't seen before. A photo. A printed one. New. It showed the 3 of us. Taken from outside the house. Through the living room window. And none of us knew the photo existed.